1 second of distraction, one skipped safety check, one loose part. That's all it takes to unleash a catastrophe. From crushing weights to explosive failures, we're exposing the split-second errors that lead to the most horrifying workplace disasters. What you witness in the next few minutes is a harsh but vital lesson, one that could literally save your life. On a ship, a massive anchor chain was being tightened by a winch, straining under immense tension. Suddenly, it reached its breaking point. The chain snapped with explosive force, lashing out like a steel whip across the deck. This is the danger of stored energy. Chains and cables under load must be inspected for wear, and workers must always stay out of the path of the tension line. When it breaks, it moves faster than you can. On the highway, a truck hauling a multi-ton steel coil slammed on its brakes to avoid a swerving car. The immense force of that sudden stop snapped the restraints. The massive coil launched forward, crashing onto the road and careening directly into another vehicle. In that moment, the laws of physics are unforgiving. When hauling heavy, rounded cargo, standard restraints aren't enough. You need specialized chocks and securing systems built to handle that incredible forward momentum. Out on the road, load security is just as important as careful driving. In a sprawling industrial yard, a forklift strained to haul an enormous steel pipe that far exceeded its capacity, tipping precariously forward. Instinctively, the driver thrust out his hands in a futile bid to halt the cascade, but the combined mass of machine and metal overwhelmed him, crashing down in a perilous heap. Overloads like this stem from disregarding equipment specs and safety protocols. Always verify weight limits, strap down loads securely with certified restraints, and resist the urge to intervene manually in falls. Opt for emergency stops instead. Keeping clear distances and conducting pre-shift inspections can transform potential tragedies into preventable near misses. A forklift operator paused at the edge of a road, waiting for a chance to cross. As he edged forward, a motorcycle came down the lane much faster than anticipated. The rider had no time to react and struck the forklift's extended forks, sending him tumbling. It was a brutal reminder of how dangerous the line between a work zone and a public road can be. When operating near traffic, you have to be seen. Use spotters, lower the forks, and make your machine impossible to miss. A worker snipped ties on truck stack blocks, but as wires slackened, the pile destabilized and avalanched, burying his spot in tumbling chaos that stunned the sight. Prep zones clear and brace cargoes pre-release. Shifts strike swift. Support adequately. Extra braces and alerts tame the tumble, safeguarding unload crews. A forklift moved in to lift a massive stack of wooden planks. As the forks rose, the sheer forward heavy weight of the load began to pull the entire machine down. The stack tilted dangerously, and the forklift's rear wheels lifted off the ground. It was a close call that shows the danger of an unbalanced, overweight load. Exceeding a forklift's rated capacity doesn't just risk the cargo, it risks flipping the entire machine. Safe lifting always starts with knowing your limits. Strolling roadside engrossed in his phone, a man collided headlong with a protruding metal shard from a stationary truck, the impact drawing blood and shock. Distractions amplify everyday dangers. Pocket devices near roads or sites, scanning surroundings fully. Alertness is armor. Parked rigs hide hazards, promote hands-free zones, and reflective markings to shield against absent-minded mishaps. A worker casually slides into view on a trolley, carrying a container of chemicals. But instead of handling it with care, he sets it down and decides to experiment, trying to light the substance. In an instant, it erupts in flames. He even tries to stomp it out with his foot, which only makes it worse. This shocking lack of judgment is a powerful reminder. Chemicals are not to be played with. Every container holds a potential violent reaction. Strict adherence to safety protocols isn't just a rule, it's what separates a normal day from a disaster. At a metal wire plant, a worker probed a coil near a formidable press when it abruptly activated, cinching the wires tight and imprisoning him in a vice-like snare. The sudden clampdown left no room for error, demanding swift intervention. Lockout tagout is non-negotiable for inspections or upkeep. Power down fully, tag hazards, and use energy-isolating devices. Proximity to kinetics invites tragedy. Conduct hazard analyses and wear anti-entrapment gear to thwart life-altering surprises. In a parking lot, an unattended car began to roll backward. A man saw it and rushed to stop it with his bare hands, pushing against the trunk. But the car's weight was too much. It continued back until it pinned him against a wall. For a terrifying moment, he was trapped before the car shifted, allowing him to escape. This is a stark reminder that you can't fight a vehicle's momentum. Always use the handbrake and wheel chocks. Mechanical safety measures are reliable. Human intervention is a dangerous gamble. Two workers were carrying a heavy steel slab across the workshop floor, a task requiring perfect balance. But all it took was one misstep. One of the workers slipped, and the entire load went with him, crashing to the floor. When you carry heavy loads by hand, your safety depends on every single step. That's why using the right equipment, like a dolly or a crane, is always the safer choice. A massive steel section swayed from a crane, its rope balanced precariously on the very edge of the hook. As the operator guided it, the load suddenly shifted. The rope shot free, and tons of steel plunged to the ground, missing a worker by just inches. A worker stood inside the giant bowl of a concrete mixer, clearing out debris. Suddenly, without warning, the feed system activated, dumping tons of heavy aggregate down on top of him. He was buried to his waist in seconds, the crushing weight pinning him as his co-workers desperately tried to dig him out. This is why you never enter a confined space like a mixer without full lockout-tagout procedures. The power must be off, and the feed lines must be secure. One oversight can turn a simple cleaning task into a terrifying trap. Offloading hefty crates from a forklift perch, a worker teetered and plummeted from the height. The fall's jolt risking fractures and worse in a routine chore gone awry. Harness up with fall arrest systems and stabilize platforms always. No unsecured stands aloft. Even low elevations bite. Safety belts and railings bridge gaps between slips and survival, mandate spotters, and anti-slip mats for elevated evens. In a high-risk attempt to move a massive steel plate, 3 forklifts were used in tandem, balancing the immense weight between them. For a moment, the dangerous maneuver seemed to be working. Then, the forks on the middle forklift buckled under the strain. The sudden loss of support created a chain reaction, tilting the other 2 machines and sending the multi-ton plate crashing to the ground. This is a critical lesson. Forklifts are not designed for team lifts. Pushing equipment beyond its engineered limits is a recipe for catastrophic failure. Always use the right equipment for the size of the load. 2 workers eased a bulky item off a pickup's tailgate, inching it to the brink for drop. But the shift unbalanced it, sending the mass pitching forward in a thunderous crash that shattered the calm, unscathed yet sobering. Map unload steps ahead. Gear up or rally extra hands for heavies. Command the center of gravity throughout. Forethought and aids ensure handling stays steady, not sudden. A crew was using a lifting platform to position a heavy machine. As it rose, the load wasn't balanced properly. It shifted, causing the entire platform to tilt sharply. The machine slid off and smashed onto the floor below. Every piece of lifting equipment has a weight limit and a center of gravity. Failing to balance the load can lead to sudden, total failure. In a plant's electrical maze, a worker grazed a live high-voltage line, convulsing from the jolt's lethal surge in an unguarded instant. Electricity commands respect. Isolate sources, glove up with dielectrics, and lock out pre-work. Fatal slips abound. Voltage probes and permits fortify against shocks. Amid factory frenzy, a forklift jammed and veered, trapping a colleague in its unyielding path, the squeeze a byproduct of cramped quarters and obscured views. Forklifts thrive on caution, crawl speeds, clear comms via horns, and pedestrian-free lanes prevent pins. Training sharpens senses. Spotters and barriers curb crushes in handling hubs. A dump truck, heavy with sand, was reversing into position while a spotter guided it from behind. The driver couldn't see that the ground was too soft to support the weight. Suddenly, the rear wheels sank deep into the dirt, causing the truck to lurch violently. The spotter had to jump out of the way. Before any heavy vehicle moves, the ground it's moving on must be inspected. A solid-looking surface can be a trap. A worker stood close to a massive steel roll suspended from a crane, trying to guide it into position by hand. He lost his grip, and the heavy load began to swing like a pendulum. Before he could get clear, it struck him, knocking him to the ground. This is why you never use your body to guide a suspended load. Always use taglines from a safe distance and stay out of the swing zone. Even a slow-moving crane load carries devastating force. In a hectic factory, a worker guided a crane-suspended steel coil by hand when control slipped. The ponderous roll pendulum swung, slamming into him with brutal impact. A fleeting error amplified the crane's might into a lethal blow. Employ taglines for guidance and maintain buffer zones from dangling loads. Evade swing paths around hefty movers. With cranes, minor sways deliver major devastation. Train on load dynamics to keep operations smooth and incident-free. In a busy work area, a forklift with no one at the controls began to roll forward. Before anyone could react, its fork slammed into a parked car. Workers rushed to stop the runaway machine, but it kept pushing, grinding metal against metal. It was a costly mistake that shows why you can never leave industrial vehicles unattended without powering them down and setting the brake. A few seconds of being unsecured is all it takes for a machine to cause thousands in damage. At an industrial yard spotting a leaking gas tank, a worker scaled to cap it tight, only for built-up pressure to rocket the lid off in an explosive burst, endangering all. Depressurize methodically first, tool up for highs, and PPE fully. Mishandles magnify mayhem. Safe vents and specs prevent pops. Steps like these safeguard sites. Deep in the factory, a worker tried roping a colossal steel plate, but it teetered, toppled, and crushed him beneath. His cries pierced the air as teammates surged to haul him out, beating the clock. Ditch ropes for proper rigging on heavy hauls. Without certified gear, instability spells doom. Invest in slings and spreaders and always have backups ready. One wobble can make metal a murderer. In a risky, improvised attempt to reach a second floor, one forklift lifted another one high into the air. From this unstable perch, the second operator tried to lift a heavy load. The whole setup swayed, and as the weight shifted, the load slid from the forks and crashed to the ground. Forklifts are not cranes, and they are certainly not elevators for other forklifts. Using equipment outside of its engineered purpose is a direct path to catastrophic failure. Always use the right tool for the job. In a steel factory, a worker walked up to a massive, upright steel roll to inspect it. It stood perfectly still, seemingly stable, but in an instant, its balance point shifted. The multi-ton roll tipped over, crashing down and pinning the worker's legs beneath its immense weight. Co-workers rushed in to help, preventing a worse outcome. This is a powerful lesson. Never assume a heavy, rounded object is secure. All steel rolls must be chocked or restrained during storage. Gravity is not a safety plan. A worker was cutting the securing wires from a heavy steel roll. As he snipped the very last one, the stored energy in the tightly bound material was released in an instant. A steel plate sprang forward with incredible force, striking him. It's a powerful reminder that materials under tension are like a loaded spring. You must always maintain a safe distance when cutting restraints and use the proper tools to control that release of energy. What looks stationary can move in a flash. A forklift operator waited for an opening and then began to cross a roadway. But a car approaching down the lane didn't see the machine in time. The driver slammed on the brakes but still collided with the heavy steel forks. Thankfully, no one was hurt, but it shows how easily these accidents can happen. Forklifts are slow, but they create a serious hazard in traffic. That's why warning lights, signs, and even a spotter are essential to alert drivers and prevent a collision. At home, a man tackled cutting a wooden frame with a handheld grinder, skipping safety boots and opting for flimsy gloves. As he bore down on the cut, the whirring disc abruptly fractured. A jagged shard ricocheted downward, slashing deeply into his unprotected foot. The DIY project devolved into pandemonium, a careless lapse morphing into a grave wound needing urgent medical attention. Treat power tools with utmost respect, at work or home. Don full protective gear like steel-toed boots and eye shields. Pre-inspect tools for cracks or wear, and remember, even minor tasks carry big risks. A faulty blade doesn't discriminate. It can slice through flesh as easily as wood. Always err on the side of caution. A worker tried to secure a massive steel slab with a simple rope. As he pulled, the immense weight shifted. The slab lost its balance and it came crashing down, pinning him underneath. Co-workers rushed in to free him just in time. This is a critical lesson. Ropes are not rigging. Heavy steel requires certified chains, slings, and proper lifting equipment. One slip can turn a multi-ton load into a deadly trap. High above the workshop floor, a heavy component being lifted by a machine suddenly broke free and crashed down. A nearby worker watched it happen, but was completely unharmed. Why? Because he was following the rules and standing well outside the potential drop zone. His safe position wasn't luck, it was procedure. Equipment can fail, but maintaining a safe distance is a rule that will always protect you. A worker was operating a crane to hoist a heavy machine part, but the hook wasn't fully secured. Despite the oversight, the lift proceeded. In a heartbeat, the unstable load broke loose, plummeting straight down and pinning him beneath its massive weight. Trapped with just a narrow air pocket sparing him from total crush, he remained conscious yet immobilized, fighting for every breath. Colleagues sprang into action, swiftly reattaching the crane and raising the load enough to extract him. He pulled through, but it was a close call. Always secure hooks, shackles, and perform thorough load checks before lifting heavy machinery. Rushing can lead to catastrophic failure. Double check, triple check everything. Relying on luck with thousands of pounds overhead is a recipe for disaster. Prioritize safety protocols to prevent such heart-stopping moments. Amid factory operations, a crane lowered a bulky load when the strained chain gave way with a vicious crack. The recoiling end lashed out like a whip, striking a nearby worker and flooring him in agony. Distrust aged or unverified chains. Remain outside tension areas at all times. Chains can morph into deadly projectiles upon failure. Mandate inspections, timely replacements, and hazard zoning to safeguard against life-shattering breaks. At a bustling construction site, a crane hoisted a massive load skyward. Two daring workers perched precariously on a slim crane beam, trying to counterbalance it with their body weight, but the burden was overwhelming, and the crane's frame buckled under the immense stress. In an instant, the entire structure gave way, plummeting in a terrifying collapse that endangered everyone below. Events like this underscore the vital need for detailed lifting strategies and precise weight assessments. Never resort to makeshift tactics like using human counterweights or risky shortcuts. Adhere strictly to load charts, deploy appropriate stabilizers, and enforce exclusion zones around suspended loads. Meticulous planning and training can avert such site-wide catastrophes. In the plant, a glitch unleashed a torrent of molten metal from a pressurized line, rocketing skyward in a blistering arc several yards tall. A worker mere feet away dodged instinctively, evading by inches. The heat singed the air, the threat palpable. Handle molten ops with precision maintenance and vigilance. Don comprehensive PPE, uphold safe standoffs, and monitor for faults. Liquid metal surges swiftly, inflicts profound burns, and offers zero do-overs. Regular drills can hone your reflexes for survival. Slicing a tension-laden rail beam. A worker unleashed its pent-up snap, the recoil whipping back to batter him fiercely. Clamp down, pre-cuts and shield with barriers. Rebounds lurk in strains. Gear for impacts. Prep secures against unpredictables, ensuring cuts stay controlled. As a forklift carried a large, heavy load across the work area, the weight began to shift. The strain was too much, and the entire load tipped forward, tumbling from the forks and crashing down. Heavy loads can become unstable with the slightest bump or turn, especially on uneven ground. A few extra moments to check the load's balance before you start moving is what prevents a dangerous drop. A worker was simply riding his bike through the yard when, without warning, a water pipe on a nearby building burst. A high-pressure blast of water erupted across the road, soaking him and instantly reducing his visibility. While he kept control, it was a sudden and dangerous situation that came from nowhere. This is a perfect example of why preventive maintenance is so crucial. A simple inspection of pipes and valves can catch a weakness before it fails, preventing an unexpected hazard that could easily cause a serious accident. A worker positioned near a machine with unguarded rotating parts reached for an item nearby when tragedy nearly unfolded. His baggy t-shirt snagged on the whirling shaft, yanking him inward with merciless power. The fabric coiled tighter, hauling his body perilously close to the machinery's deadly grip. Miraculously, the shirt ripped free before he was fully drawn in, leaving him rattled but unharmed. Avoid loose clothing around operating machinery and ensure all rotating components have proper guards. A single catch can suck you in before you blink. Machines show no mercy. Stay vigilant. Proper attire and barriers can save lives in high-risk zones. In a teeming factory, a crane maneuvered a colossal load overhead while crews toiled below, blind to the impending peril. The burden clipped a towering machine en route, toppling it in a deafening tumble that sparked pandemonium. Alert workers spotted the tilt and fled, dodging injury by seconds. Core lesson: ban work zones under elevated loads and guarantee ample maneuvering space for cranes. Map out routes in advance, use guides for tight quarters, and enforce hard hats with impact alerts. Proactive clearance and zoning transform crowded floors into safer workspaces. A worker stood precariously close to the edge of a wastewater pool with only a low, inadequate fence for protection. As he balanced, he lost his footing and plunged into the contaminated water. Luckily, he was able to pull himself out unharmed. This incident shows that a weak barrier is almost as bad as no barrier at all. Areas like this require proper, full-height guardrails and clear warning signs. Workplace safety is about engineering the danger out of the environment, not just hoping people will be careful. A heavy load was being lowered by a crane when the lifting chain, strained to its limit, suddenly snapped. The broken end whipped sideways with incredible speed, striking a worker who was standing too close. The sheer force of the recoil threw him to the ground. Chains under load are like loaded weapons. They must be inspected for wear and damage, and everyone must stay clear of the tension zone. A single weak link can have devastating consequences. A worker stood before a bucket of glowing, molten metal, trying to start the pour, but instead of using a careful technique, he began striking the side of the container with a long metal rod, sending dangerous splashes of liquid fire into the air with each hit. Then, the flow gave way all at once, pouring uncontrollably onto the floor. Molten metal must be handled with precision, not brute force. One careless move can trigger a violent splash or an unstoppable spill with devastating results. A team of workers was carefully unloading large, heavy sheets of glass from a truck. It's an operation requiring perfect balance. But during the process, one worker lost his footing and fell, bringing the massive sheet of glass down with him. It shattered on impact, creating an instant hazard of sharp, heavy shards. This shows how quickly handling fragile materials can go wrong. It requires not just strength, but stable footing, clear communication, and proper protective gear. One slip can turn valuable product into a dangerous mess. In a vast industrial yard, a bulky machine dangled from crane cables high overhead. Defying basic rules, two workers lingered directly underneath. A grave error. Abruptly, the wires frayed and failed, sending the load hurtling earthward. By a hair's breadth, they dodged the impact, hearts pounding from the brush with death. This narrow escape exposes a fundamental peril. Never position yourself beneath hanging loads. Designate and enforce no-go zones under cranes, scrutinize rigging for wear daily, and respect capacity thresholds. In a textile factory, a worker was feeding material into an overhead machine. In a flash, a loose piece of fabric was snagged by the rollers, pulling her hand and arm with it. She was lifted completely off her feet, dragged toward the mechanism before she managed to tear free. High-speed machinery is unforgiving. A safe distance is essential because loose material can be caught in an instant, giving you zero time to react. A man crammed several lengthy steel rods vertically into a passenger elevator and hit the button to ascend. Midway up, the rods jammed against the shaft's overhead clearance, halting the car with a violent jerk. The door pinned shut by the wedged metal. He wrestled futilely to dislodge them, turning a routine ride into a confined nightmare. Skip passenger elevators for oversized or elongated loads. Gauge clearances up front and opt for freight lifts or rigging setups. If jammed, halt efforts and summon pros, never force it. Employ spotters for long hauls, secure horizontally where feasible, and enforce signage banning bulky items. Basic verifications and apt gear avert entrapments. Perched near a crane-hoisted tilt bucket brimming with crimson molten metal, a worker jabbed it with a lengthy rod to initiate pouring. But his aggressive prod sparked hazardous splatters, flinging fiery droplets aloft. Then, the metal surged out uncontrollably, flooding the ground. Any misstep could have immersed him in agony. Manage molten flows with finesse, not brute force. Use specialized tools, refine methods, and clear zones. Avoid agitation that risks spills. One reckless poke can unleash a fiery cascade and permanent harm. Emphasize training and barriers to contain the chaos. Walking along a conveyor line, a worker took a familiar shortcut, stepping from one side to the other, but this time his boot slipped into the narrow gap between two sections. The moving belt immediately trapped his foot. It's a painful reminder that moving machinery has no safe spots to step. Designated walkways exist for a reason. Taking a few extra seconds to go around is always better than a shortcut that ends in injury. A forklift, loaded with goods, moved toward a truck to unload. But a worker was standing in the narrow space right beside it. As the forklift advanced to position the load, the worker found himself pinned. With no room to escape between the heavy machine and the solid wall of the trailer. This is a classic crush zone scenario. It highlights why there must be clear, designated safe zones during loading and unloading. Workers should never stand in the direct path of moving equipment, especially when space is tight. High up on a factory platform, a worker was completely absorbed by his phone. Distracted, he casually reached out, opened a safety gate, and gave his trolley a nudge forward, all without looking up. But beyond that gate was nothing but empty air. In a split second, both he and the trolley plunged to the floor below. This is a brutal example of how a moment of distraction can be fatal. In a high-risk environment, your full attention is your most important piece of safety equipment. The job site is no place for divided focus. When bags of material caught fire in a storage area, the workers' first instinct was to save the product. They began dragging bags away from the flames. Meanwhile, 2 fire extinguishers on a nearby wall went unused as the fire grew. In an emergency, your first move is the most important one. You must fight the fire, not rescue the material. Safety comes first, and that means using the proper equipment immediately. A worker lingered beside an active mixer, attempting to snatch an object from its side. In that split second, his loose shirt grazed the spinning shaft. The material instantly entangled, twisting relentlessly and dragging him toward the relentless churn. He battled fiercely, yanking back with all his strength as the pull intensified. Time stretched endlessly until the fabric finally shredded, freeing him, shaken but intact. Steer clear of rotating equipment in loose garb or without adequate shielding. What begins as a minor brush can escalate into a life-threatening tug-of-war. Dress appropriately and remain hyper-aware, as mixers won't halt until forced. Implement lockout procedures for added protection. Amid a hectic construction zone, workers clustered near a towering wall, oblivious to its eroded base. Massive excavators rumbled nearby, their vibrations gnawing at the weakened supports. Without warning, the wall buckled and crumbled. 2 colleagues scrambled clear, but one was ensnared under the avalanche of rubble, fighting for air. Such collapses reveal glaring oversights, mandate daily structural evaluations when excavating close to buildings, halt heavy ops near compromised walls without reinforcements or controlled teardowns. Enhanced site maps, real-time communication via radios, and barrier setups could have sidestepped this avoidable heartbreak. In a cement plant, a worker neared the furnace to spark it up, but he improvised with an unsuitable item unfit for flames. The response was explosive. Flames burst forth in a ferocious blast, swallowing the entrance in scorching fury. He vaulted backward in the nick of time, dodging what could have been a lethal blaze. Stick to approved fuels and rigid ignition protocols. Never experiment near open fires. One mismatched substance can transform a furnace into an inferno bomb. Equip yourself with fire-resistant gear and train on emergency shutdowns to turn potential disasters into mere scares. On a job site, a towering steel framework sat precariously on a transport vehicle, primed for offloading. Bypassing specialized gear, a worker boldly attempted a hands-on unload. The structure wobbled, then tumbled uncontrollably. His desperate grab did nothing against its crushing force, turning the area into a hazard zone. Manual handling of hefty materials is a recipe for disaster. Human power can't compete with industrial weights. Insist on cranes, forklifts, or hydraulic aids tailored to the task, and establish safety buffers during transfers. Advanced planning, team coordination, and PPE like reinforced gloves ensure risks stay managed, not magnified. Boarding an elevator with a gas cylinder in tow, a man remained unaware of its insidious leak. The sealed space swiftly saturated, and a rogue spark birthed a confined conflagration, trapping him in rising flames. Inspect cylinders for leaks via soapy tests and transport only in ventilated open areas. Secure upright with caps intact. Overlook nothing. Routine hauls can ignite into infernos. Opt for dedicated carts and fire-suppressant elevators to defuse potential blasts. On a chaotic build site, A worker lingered too near a bulldozer mid-load, vanishing into its blind spot. The unwitting scoop buried him in cement, dumping him afar in a harrowing haul. Blind zones breed blunders, deploy spotters, mirrors, and backup cams. Confirm clearances via signals before digs. Distance and dialogue deter drags. Foster visibility protocols to keep sites incident-free. In a hectic kitchen, a stovetop utensil ignited into flames, sparking panic. The chef's instinctive douse with water backfired spectacularly, fueling a grease-fueled inferno that raced across counters and cabinets. Ditch water for oil or gas blazes, kill the heat source, smother with a metal cover, or deploy a Class K extinguisher. Master fire types through drills. A tiny spark can balloon into catastrophe. Stock suppression tools and evacuate promptly to contain the spread. A crane lifted a heavy steel plate using only a magnetic lifter. As it reached its destination, the magnet failed, and the steel plate plummeted to the ground. This is a stark reminder to always verify the rated capacity of your equipment. For critical lifts, you need to be certain your connection is secure, and you must always keep the drop zone completely clear. A truck brimmed with towering styrofoam slabs lashed down tight, but a spark from heat, rub, or stray ignited the crown, flames leaping fast. Crews swarmed to slash ties and salvage, but the blaze devoured the pile in a frantic blink, torching the hull to ash. Haul flammables with fireproof wraps, isolated holds, and heat dodges. Prevention trumps panic. For such volatiles, audits and extinguishers ready shield loads from lightning losses. A worker steered a crane-suspended steel coil toward upright stacks when a grounded one wobbled free, slamming down and trapping him in its crush. Teammates mobilized a crane and muscle to hoist it off after agonizing minutes, freeing him rattled but alive. Avoid pinch points between hanging and stored loads. Death traps. Block, crib, and lock standing coils pre-lift, tagline from afar with a certified signaler. Inspect routinely, rig right, and zone exclusions. No skips on protocols that guard lives. In a factory yard, a crane was lowering a massive steel coil, bringing it just a few feet from the ground. Believing the danger was over, a worker stepped in close to position it. At that exact moment, the rigging failed. The coil slammed down, missing him by inches. This is why the rule is absolute. Never enter the area beneath a suspended load. The danger zone exists until the load is completely and securely on the ground. A forklift moved in to lift a tall, unstable stack of glass soda bottles. As the forks went under and lifted, the balance point shifted. The entire stack tipped forward, crashing to the ground in an explosion of shattering glass and sticky soda. It was a costly mess created in a split second. This is why with fragile top-heavy loads, stability is everything. You have to move slowly, keep the load level, and make sure it's secure before you lift. In a carefully coordinated but risky maneuver, two forklifts lifted a single massive steel coil. As they began to lower it, the coil shifted just slightly. That small movement put an immense, sudden strain on the equipment. One of the forks couldn't take the pressure and snapped with a sharp crack. Before any heavy lift, forks and gear must be inspected for wear, because when there is no margin for error, a small, unseen weakness can lead to total failure. Perched atop a transformer-like behemoth, a worker ignited his welding torch. Unbeknownst to him, an internal glitch brewed. The machine erupted violently, its lid blasting open in a surge of sparks and pressure. Welding on live or unisolated gear invites explosive chaos. Always power down, vent stored energies, and verify isolation before igniting. Prep work is non-negotiable. Lockout, tagout protocols, pressure releases, and thorough checks prevent mid-repair detonations. Equip with arc-rated suits and face shields to buffer against the unforeseen, turning hazardous tasks into controlled operations. In a sweltering metalworks, an abrupt machine glitch unleashed a torrent of molten material, slamming into a worker and flooring him in searing agony. Alert teammates leaped in, hauling him clear before the flow engulfed more, their rapid response averting escalation. Enforce rigorous equipment audits and operational guidelines around molten ops. Don heat-resistant suits, face shields, and thermal barriers. Keep standoff distances sacred. A momentary fault can scorch deeply. Schedule predictive maintenance to catch issues early and save skin. Inside a steel factory, a crane was positioning a large bundle of steel bars. As it was being lowered, a worker stepped between the bundles to untie the securing chains. But as the crane lifted a chain away, it snagged, causing the heavy load to shift violently. In an instant, the worker was caught and squeezed between the two massive bundles. This is a classic pinch point accident, and it's why you must never place yourself between a suspended load and a fixed object. The load must be completely stable and on the ground before anyone approaches. On a highway, a fuel tanker was on fire, forcing traffic to a standstill. From what seemed like a safe distance, drivers watched the flames grow. Then, in a blinding flash, the tanker exploded in a massive fireball, sending a shockwave down the road. If you ever encounter a situation like this, stay much farther back than you think is necessary. Call emergency services, clear the area, and never underestimate how quickly the situation can escalate. Inside a factory, a worker leaned in to inspect a machine while it was still in full operation. He got too close. In a flash, a moving component struck him, knocking him hard to the ground. He was lucky the incident wasn't worse, but it highlights a golden rule of industrial safety. Never approach or service running equipment. A safe distance must always be maintained. Before any inspection, the machine must be fully powered down and locked out. There are no exceptions. An operator was carefully lifting two heavy boxes, aiming to place them on top of an already high stack. But as the load reached its peak, it became unstable. The boxes tilted and then toppled, falling directly toward workers standing nearby. They scrambled back just as the load hit the ground. This shows the incredible danger of lifting at height. A safe perimeter is not a suggestion, it's a necessity. People must be kept clear of the drop zone, because when a load is that high, there's no time to react. A forklift was setting a heavy load onto a truck when the weight shifted, and it began to tilt. The operator fought to steady it, and another worker instinctively rushed in to help push it back. But human strength was no match for the weight. A fork buckled and the load crashed to the ground, narrowly missing the helper. It's a hard lesson. Never try to physically stop a failing mechanical load. The only safe action is to clear the area and let it fall. Inside a warehouse, a small spark from an electrical fault ignited some material. A worker rushed in with a water hose, but it was already too late. The flames erupted, devouring nearby goods and turning the entire space into an inferno within moments. This just goes to show how an unprepared space can be lost in seconds. Regular electrical checks are non-negotiable, and it's critical to have the correct type of fire extinguisher within reach. The right tool can stop a disaster before it ever begins.